Welcome back to Space Engineers on the Xbox One version of the game. This is my creative save, but it's obeying survival mode rules. This is part 2 of the ship building tutorial, and this is going to be a ship that will take you from the Earth-like planet out into space, or it should do. It's basically based on this, the Working Space Skelly. I'll put a link to this from Mod.io so you can take a look at it yourself. It's a fairly simple build, and it consists of a few bits and pieces. But it works. It uses atmospheric thrusters and hydrogen thrusters to get you into space. So, what I tend to do is I tend to use a large tank on the small grid and put thrusters in every direction that I can. You're going to need the resources to do this though. But if you're looking to go into space, you should already have found cobalt and a bunch of other things. So you can make metal grids, and then you can make atmospheric thrusters. And you'll need them for all your thrusters. And we started off with this one, again, on a powered grid, with a rotor which will provide power to the ship, batteries. This ship's busy charging up at the moment, and there's a good way to check if what you're building has power on it. Just build a light attached to it, because an unpowered grid will not power the light. But if you drop a block in between here like this, remember I'm using creative mode tools, so I can build this quickly. And to get to that, hold down the right bumper, press Y, open the admin menu and enable creative mode tools. Back to the ship. So you have a cockpit, you've built yourself a gantry like you saw me do in my previous part 1 video. You're going to need the requisite components to survive in space. I suggest the minimum you're going to need a way to generate oxygen. I like having the O2 generators and tanks. Let's have a look. Here's the small grid oxygen tank. Now you'll see it has one large port and 2 small ones. So what you do is you connect it up like I've done, like this, to the cockpit, facing the 2 ports against the 2 ports on the cockpit. You'll then have an oxygen generator, or rather an oxygen tank, to store all the lovely oxygen you're going to be producing. Now you're going to need somewhere to store all this lovely, lovely, lovely oxygen and all your ice. I suggest a single to begin with, because you don't want to go overboard with these things. Medium cargo container. Now there's a couple of things you can do here. You could orientate the medium cargo container like this, look, and build it like that. If you look at my Working Space Skelly, I have done exactly that. What I've done there is I've built cargo container. Like this. Now you want a cargo conveyor. So open up the build menu again. Move to gas and logistics, and you want the conveyor junction. Now conveyor junctions are brilliant because they have connections across all sides. This also allows us to put in a way to recharge the ship and to attach the all-important oxygen generators. So have I done this right? No, I haven't. Hold on a moment. One thing we want to make sure is that we have the top part of this. It doesn't have it on all sides. I got that wrong. That's the beauty. It has it on most of the sides. There. It has 3 on the left and right, 1 on the top and the bottom, and 1 on the back and the front. Apologies for that. But these things are always tricky to remember. So as I was saying, we want our friend, the connector, attached. Like so, underneath. And the ship is starting to take shape. You'll see in a second one of the reasons. I could very quickly show you on this ship by dismantling parts of it, but we want one of these on either side. Oxygen gens. So we pop open our gas and logistics, go to an O2H2 Jenny, and you'll see it has 2 ports there, which should line up with that port there. And line up with that port there. So building from front to back, we're still creating ship production, gas and logistics. Now we want the all-important hydrogen tank, and you'll see it has 2 ports, front and back. You want to pop that smack bang. Hopefully that's aligned properly. Let's just get rid of it again, make sure. I think that's got it. The ghost is there. So you'll see. You've now got the basic shape of the ship, but it's not going to function at the moment. It's missing important components, and it's missing the all-important battery power. So what I like to do with this design is build, if you can see it, some batteries. I like to rotate them so they're facing this direction, and I like to have at least 4 of these lovely batteries at any one time. Never have enough power. You don't want too much weight though. The battery there. This also gives you a great place to stick your landing gear. Now, I won't be covering adding armour blocks to this. You can play around with those designs. You'll notice this has no armour blocks on it. So you could download this from mod.io, slap some armour blocks on it yourself. But we've got power. And with power, we now need a couple of extra things. One, we're going to need a gyroscope. This isn't a combat craft, it doesn't need to spin too much on a dime or a penny. So, my suggestion... Oh, don't worry about that.
Fuel critical.
My suggestion, pop this here. And I always do like to put an antenna on the ship as well. Never know if you want to make it into a remote control. Pop at the front. You'll start to see it starting to take shape somewhat. Similar in design to the ship behind it. I'm just going to nip over here to my temporary base of operations to avoid the annoying constant whinge in my ear of my fuel low. I suggest as well, if you are building like I do, get yourself at least 3 of these bottles, and it'll help you with your jetpack. And of course, if you're building in creative mode, you don't have to worry at all about any problems with fuel. Back to the ship. Here we go. So we have a gyroscope, an antenna, and if you look, we've got power but no fuel, because we're not yet generating anything. We've got no ice in there. Next thing I'd suggest, looking at the ship, we want it to be able to go up and mine, especially if we're going into space and we're looking for various things. But really, if you're looking for ice, you've got a ship that can mine. Well, it can basically pull all that lovely ice in. And what I've done here is I've connected up a lot of this to this port here. And the best way to do that, and now I'm building with creative mode tools, as I said, I'm using the wrong one. Go to small conveyors on gas and logistics. I'm using small conveyors. I love small conveyors rather than conveyor tubes, because then if you need to add a hydrogen thruster anywhere on this build, you can pop a new hydrogen thruster on without having to break a tube and faff about. You can just build that hydrogen thruster and slap it straight on. So at the moment, this will pull ore or ice into the cockpit. I want it to go into the cargo container, and I'm not using any advanced techniques like sorters or symmetry mode. I have other videos that show you how to build in symmetry mode. I am using line mode. Again, I have videos that show you how to enable all that. But you'll see, this makes it very easy to make a more useful build. By just adding conveyors where you want. You can add more thrust where you want. So that's successfully linked up the drill to the cargo box. And that will also pull ice into this system. Now what we want, now we've got all the power, we've got the gyroscope, we have all the parts that are necessary for running a ship. We want all important thrusters. And my suggestion would be, as I've done here, you only need a few hydrogen thrusters, because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using Atmo thrusters to lift the ship to about 5,000 before we turn it skywards and we put all the thrust we can on that big thruster there. So what I like to do with these is I love to drop in a large Atmo thruster, large hydrogen thruster on the back. Thank you, cat. Knock my controller hand. A large hydrogen thruster on the back, and then surround this here. You don't want to go overboard. Split Sea on YouTube has some absolutely brilliant tutorials, even though it's PC focused, Space Engineers, on the thruster to weight ratios of the game. Well worth checking out. So we have 5 hydrogen thrusters there. If you look, it mirrors my build here. And then what you want is, you want, like we did with the ion thrusters, you want to look at your build and you want to say, okay, well, one thruster's not going to provide much lift. So on this one, if you notice, I've equalised the thrust on this. So with conveyor blocks it's easy enough as well. You can count 3 from the back here. 1, 2, 3, then put a hydrogen thruster there. If you need more lift, you could also pop one here and one here. I like to try and, as much as I can, balance out thrusters. So if I have one there, I do like to try and put a thruster here, 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 and here. So I like to put thrusters like that. So I've got enough thrust for lift, and I have downward thrust. I want thrust so I can stop the ship. To there. Remember, you're going to be countering the large hydrogen thruster at the back as well, and that thing can push out some power. So, you notice with this build, I didn't actually put another set of hydros facing left and right. On this build, I'm actually going to drop hydro there, hydro there. Now that, in theory, has all the hydrogen thrusters you'd need. It has forward, it has backwards, it has up, down, left and right. To give you all the requisite space lift you'd need. You'll notice on this as well, I dropped an ore detector. I always think if you're going to take a ship out into space like this, if you could sneak one in, it's always fun to drop ore detectors in. Like that. And we've got all the hydrogen thrust that we require. And one of the rules I use is 2 hydrogen O2 hydrogen generators per large tank on a build. You could add a third in, which would mean pulling out this battery, probably popping one in and then sticking a battery on top of it. This build here just uses the 2. And right now, let's have a look. Do I want to do anything different on this one with the landing gear? And make a quick save while I'm at it. Well, if it's going to land on the ground, it doesn't hurt to have a couple of landing gear. And if you look at the one that I've placed down already, you'll see there's a way to work out which is the front of landing gear and which is the back. The big gear are easier, but usually the long piston is placed to the front. So this is a very, very basic build design. You could get away with just a 2 landing gear. If you're wanting to build this landing gear though, what we can do should give me enough room to play around with the landing gear at some point. Might have to cut more of it back. I want it forward one more. There we go. Landing gear in place. Don't think I can fit another block in there. Nope, that'll do. So we have landing gear. We have these components. So far, there's no ice on this one. But again, it is a very similar build to this here. In fact, it's pretty much identical apart from the extra thrusters. So next thing you want to do is, if you're going to go for a pure hydrogen build, then I do suggest having at least 3 O2 generators and probably more hydrogen thrusters than I've got. If you're going for a hybrid build, a mix of atmospheric and hydrogen, then it's time to look at your build and work out how many you need to give you lift. Well, I have on this one, either side, lifting thrusters wise, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 hydrogen atmospheric thrusters, 4 atmo thrusters to give me lift. And because we're in a gravity situation, we don't need that many to push the ship down. I dropped just a couple on because I want more lift. I want a lot more lift with these Atmos than I do anything else. So looking at the build on this one, pop some Atmo thrusters on. Well, we want lifting thrusters first. So let's have, say, 1 here, 1 there. Definitely think I want 1 at the back of that engine there. So that's 3 so far. One on the outer wing, just behind the lights, is 4. Now if I mirror that on this side, these ports make it really easy to sort of, that's a total of 8 thrusters providing lift for the ship. In theory, I could cut that ship loose and it should hover. I'm not going to do that just yet though. So really I'm not concerned overly on flying this ship in atmosphere, but I still need the requisite amount of atmospheric thrusters to counter the forces. I want to provide myself with some forward thrust in a minute, but for now I'm going to just have a couple of these thrusters here, which will give me just enough thrust to push the ship downwards. I don't want it to go too fast, otherwise these things smack into the ground. And that's never good. Okay. Thrusters. To make me go forward. Again, I'm not overly fussed about using these engines to go too fast in atmosphere. So I'm thinking, same deal. 2 here. Should give me enough to push it around quite nicely. Same deal. Thinking on this build though, I'm going to pop them almost in the same place. So that's forward and backward. Up, down. All we need now are left and right. And again, looking at the build, I'm not overly concerned about too much thrust. Potentially get away with just having one thruster pushing left, one thruster pushing right. On the build here I have 2 for either. It's up to you, however you're feeling. You can put them where you want, you don't have to put them where I do. This is, like I said, it's a very simple build, more designed to get you out into space than it is to do anything else. So, same deal. We have all the thrust, and at the moment, of course, we have no ice in this one, so hydrogen wise it's not tanked up, but this is a very similar build, as I said, to this one. And this one has all the controls mapped. So what we're going to do now is, before we go even further, is we're going to look at the control panel on this thing. So jump into the cockpit, and then we are going to hit the inventory button. We're going to use the right trigger to tab all the way to info. Then we're going to flick the left stick to the right once and press A. Now we're going to rename this grid. This is one of the problems I see a lot when people upload to Mod.io. They don't rename the grids. Rename your grid. I'm going to call this Demo. Minor. One. Confirm it with OK. Then go back to your control panel. Now you'll see I'm actually connected at the moment to this main grid via the rotor. And so when you're building with rotors, like I said in the last video, rotors will provide power to connected grids, and that's important when you're building in survival, so that you charge your batteries. The last part of this tutorial, because I want to break this into 3 videos, I don't want to overwhelm people too much. will be setting this ship up for space flight. But just to sort of look at this one, you'll see all the controls are mapped. There's a couple of things you can do, which I'm going to cover in the third and final part of this particular small ship tutorial set, and that's how to group your thrusters so that you can change the thrust override, point the ship skywards, tap the thrust override. You're not constantly having to provide thrust off the stick, and you can keep within the 100 meters a second Space Engineer speed limit. You won't use as much fuel that way. So for part 3 we'll be taking this, setting all the controls upon it. We will be then making sure it's fueled enough with ice, taking to the skies and reaching space. So I hope you found this useful. As always, stay safe, take care, happy engineering, have fun with the game. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.